Okay. Welcome to the Oconee County Art and Historical Commission. Today is April 7th, 2022. Would like to go ahead and at this time open it up for public comment. If anyone would like to come forward and make any public comments to the commission, this is the time to do so. Okay. Our first item is the approval of minutes from March 10th, 2022. They were included in our email packet, but
Sorry. I do not have them printed for you today. If you want to push those to the next meeting, we can. And that way I'll print them all.
let's just do that. Okay, next is the treasurer's report.
So you have two items encumbered. The two historical markers, the Cane Creek historical marker, the Allen Green historical marker. And we're anticipating those being about $2,700 a piece. That leaves you a current balance of $1,600. With the initial money that you spent with some of the mural photography, and we're still using him, so I kept $500 back for him to take some more photography for the murals that we're getting ready to add to the website. So that gives you an updated number. It may fluctuate just a touch depending on the final cost of those markers. And we have communicated with Department of Archives and History. They're a couple months behind on their review process. So we will work to make sure we encumber those funds and have them ready for a purchase order as soon as we get the review process completed.
Okay.
So the Cane Creek one's been submitted?
I'm sorry?
The Cane Creek historical mark, that's been submitted?
No, I don't think.
We're gonna try to do it at the same time, just to
Okay.
efficiency.
Okay. Then I guess we'll move on now to our discussion items. Our first item is the South Carolina American Revolution, oh my goodness, Sister Centennial Commission
That's a new name.
presentation. Mr. Bill Davis.
Well, thank you for allowing me to come up with that. And, you know, that issue is one that has haunted us. The title for this organization was thought up by a local mayor, not here, but think about trying to market that name. It's impossible. We kind of call ourselves World War 250, just people remember it better. But really, I'm here to not only present about the South Carolina American Revolution Centennial Commission, but to tie it into something called the Liberty Trail. And the reason I wanted to present both of them is that we're working hand in hand to do the same sorts of things. We both have two major goals. The first is education, because education should always be first. But the education we're focused on is educating people on a heritage that we've lost, and that is the pivotal role that South Carolina played in winning independence. If you look back at your history books, before 1860, the South was recognized. After that, Professor Bancroft at Harvard was kind of the guru of history books, and he wrote a new American history book and basically wrote us out. Nothing happened after Yorktown, and Yorktown was really in New York. We just lost that history, and we need to reclaim that. And that's something that our children need to know, our grandchildren need to know, visitors need to know, everybody needs to know, but it's because it's true. The second goal that we have is technically called cultural heritage tourism. You can also call it local economic development. And when the legislature created the commission, and this is a legislative commission with members appointed by the House, the Senate, and the governor. We also have two departmental partners, the South Carolina Department of Archives and History, which is for the education aspects of it, and the South Carolina Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. obviously for the other side, the tourism department. We are also partnered with the South Carolina Battleground Preservation Trust, so it'll come up in my talk about the Liberty Trail when I switch over to that. The goal of this group is to commemorate and celebrate what happened in the American Revolution in South Carolina. And the commission has decided that we want to tell the story of everyone who was in South Carolina from 1770 to 1783. The reason we picked these dates are in Boston on March the 5th of 1770, the Boston Massacre occurred. That's the first bloodshed that we can identify in something that led up to the American Revolution. In April of 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, and some people forget this, but in that treaty, Great Britain recognized that South Carolina was a free and independent nation. There was no United States. So they created or recognized 13 nations at that point. Nations like brothers and sisters sometimes don't get along if you just go back and read your history. But that's something that some people forget. But we want to talk about all the people, usually in situations like this, particularly anything dealing with a war, you will talk about the two protagonists. And you normally talk about the one who won. And, you know, watch the Patriot. And we want to tell those stories. We want to tell the stories of the people who were fighting against the king, but we also want to tell the stories of the people who were fighting for the king. You know, a lot of those were people that became South Carolinians. I mean, we need to tell those stories. We need to tell the stories of the mercenaries. A number of the mercenaries actually deserted and became South Carolinians, and we need to tell the story of the Redcoats. But that's what everybody does. We want to talk about the under and unrepresented people. In South Carolina, particularly in what we call the backcountry, and of course, people in Charleston call the backcountry anything west of Broadsburg. But we want to tell the story of the women and children, and truthfully, the women, in my mind, suffered more in that war than the men did. Andrew Pickens calls, and Bob says, I got to go serve my militia duty. He gets his hunting rifle, he gets his hunting vest, he gets his hunting pack of bullets, he gets a little jerky, he joins John and Sam, and they go whistling down the road. They're going on a hunting trip, basically, a good old boys thing. Every now and then they have to fight, but not that often. But the women are left doing 39 hours of work instead of just 19 a day. They're left with the children, they're left with the pigs, the goats, and whatever. And they're left with a neighbor who might be mad at them for something that happened 3 years ago at the church picnic, because these things happened if you look back in history. And that neighbor might have decided that they're going to be a Tory because you're a Whig, or vice versa. And you've got to worry about them coming over and burning your house and stealing your food and killing your children. I mean, this is all parts of the story of this creative fight that we had here. But those stories aren't told nearly as much as they should be. We need to tell the story of all the peoples of color. We need to tell the story of the African descendants who were either free or enslaved and were here. They were a major proportion of our population at that time. And we need to tell the story, as we were talking a little while ago, of the Native Americans. And I laughingly say when I give this thing, I'm not sure I'll say it in this part of the country, but that this area was Indian country at the time. It really was. I mean, you know, the whites were not supposed to be settling this area at the time. And again, I've got a grandson graduated from Clemson, but I sometimes say that a lot of people still think this is Indian country, but that's Carolina graduates mostly. But we really need to tell those stories, and the idea that you've got a local Cherokee museum and somebody who's interested is a tremendous boon. We've contacted the national tribes, but we're not getting as much feedback as we'd like. Those are hard stories to find because they don't have written histories. And it's very difficult for us to research it. It's not on the internet. So we need to work with them to elicit those stories. We're going to do a number of things. We're going to have a free website, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, We've got a bibliography of things that professors have read and said, this is a good book on Southern campaigns of the American Revolution. There's about 200 or more than that on our list that will be on the website. We're gonna have a timeline to try to show what happened every day. We will laugh about road markers. A little while ago, you all talked about some. 309 road markers are approved in South Carolina for the colonial period. About 20% of them are either gone or damaged or need refurbishing. We want to fix it, and we want to add about 125 more. Do what you all are doing. Go through archives and history. I was talking to Phil, I'm on one of those boards too, but anyway, we'll try to get those things approved as quick as we can. We're already getting people to do new research, to interpret documents. Thomas Sumter's papers have never been digitized, they've never been really studied, and nobody's ever written anything about them. We've got somebody working on that, as a number of other things. And we're doing something that in my generation we'd say is cool. Now, my grandchildren might say awesome, but, and that's something I kind of laughed at first, but it's become very popular. We've got our own license plate. And these things are, I've had people, in the last 2 weeks, I've had 5 people tell me that they ordered one while we were sitting in the meeting. And they're because we're not trying to do like Clemson or Carolina and make money out of it. So it will cost you the same thing as your regular license plate. If you go to the special license plate thing, it's the top one, it's the last one entered, so it's right at the top of the list. And you send in $40, which is what it normally costs you when you get your new license every 3 years. They'll send you back whatever credit you've got for turning it in early. And this thing, it helps us in marketing this across the state. And I've seen them in Charleston, I saw one in Walterboro, I've seen them in Columbia. I mean, they're beginning to pop up already, they're available. But the goal really is to focus on the counties, and that's where Dave and Phil and all come in. We want to help the counties do what they want to do. That means we need to get a diverse, inclusive committee across the county, represent rural areas, represent municipalities, represent the whole business. And then try to tell the story of everybody that's here in a way that will help us re-educate people, and also that will help us, that will be attractive to people, to make people come in. That cultural heritage tourism thing. So we want to help you set it up. We can help you do research, although it appears that you've got people who already know a whole lot about what the history is up there. We can help you assure that you're talking about the right spot. The Musgroves Mill State Park, you all pass it when you go down the interstate. It's got a great, it's been there about 10 years, 12 years, I guess, got a great visitor center. The state really it's a nice state park. They just missed the battlefield. The battlefield's about 2 miles off. This Liberty Trail project, I'll get to in a second, found the battlefield by archaeological exploration and so forth, and bought the battlefield and gave it to the state park. And that's what both of these groups want to do. They don't want to own land. They want to get it, conserve it, and give it to somebody where somebody else takes care of it in the future. So that's just an example of that. When we were formed, the creating legislation said they would give us $25,000, and of course, as sometimes happens in Columbia, they didn't appropriate us any money. They just told us they were going to give us money. So then we tried to apply for a budget, and we were moving along really well in 2020 when everything shut down. And so we finally got our $1.46 million budget, which is what we asked for this fiscal year. But if you've ever worked for state government, when you spend state government money, they don't want you to do that. And it is amazing. It took us until the first week of November to write a check, and we had that money on July the 1st. So it's kind of frustrating, and that's why I say we're going to have a website, we're going to do this and that. We'll get there. This year we asked for 9.9 million. we're trying to make this really meaningful for South Carolina. Most of that is going to go to sites. We want every county to figure out their main attractions, the best place that they can tell the story of their county. And then we want to not only help you be sure you're in the right place, but we want to make it visitable. And that's the word that Dwayne Parrish, the head of PRT, came up with. I don't know how to spell it. But what it means, I mean, you all know, if you're on a South Carolina two-lane road, and most of these battles, we had over 400 battles. We had 2 in Charleston, 2 in Camden, and everything else is out in the country. And if you try to pull off on one of South Carolina's roads, you're going to get hit by a chicken truck or you know, a wood lumber truck or something. I mean, you're going to get killed. You've got to get people off of our roads. So you've got to have not an interstate rest stop. You just need a place that's gravel or paved, where you can put 8 or 10 cars and 2 school buses, because we really are focusing on the educational aspects of this thing. But as best we can tell through the Department of Transportation and things, if we find a place where we want to do one of these, and the state owns the land, to do it is going to be no less than $250,000. So if we're trying to do one in each county and then follow up with more, that's why we have to ask for all this money. The governor approved $9.9 million. The House this year said, no, you don't need $4.8 million. We hadn't heard from the Senate yet. But if you look at these things, and the PRT people keep up with this amazingly well, there really is a groundswell of information out about the Revolutionary War. Interest is building. And the crescendo is going to be 76, 77, that time period. So what we would like to do is get as many of these things open before then as we can. But even if we don't get them open, the commission's going to last, as far as we're concerned, until 2033 now. Some of us won't be here. But what we build at these sites will still be here. And what we're talking about is places for people every year to come back and visit. Different people, the same people, whatever. So we're trying to create something that is going to be meaningful for the future. Talking about the sites is kind of leading me to the Liberty Trail. Liberty Trail is an interesting partnership. Going back to the early 1990s, a group of people got together and they wanted to preserve Civil War sites, battlefields. They formed a number of organizations. They eventually coalesced into a group called the Civil War Trust. Since the early 1990s, the Civil War Trust has conserved over 53,000 acres of battlefield land, most of it between Richmond and Washington. So we're not talking about cheap land. These people know how to raise money. And you might remember, well, this is a number of years ago, but Walt Disney decided they were going to do a new theme park right up near Washington. And it was going to be right next to the battlefield at Manassas, or Bull Run. What the group now is called the American Battlefield Trust, but it was the Civil War Trust at the time. They beat Mickey. They're the ones that told Mickey, you can't come here. They know what they're doing. It really is a very well organized group. You look at their website, the American Battlefield Trust, and I think you'll be pretty amazed. But when they decided to change their name and to expand to all of the wars that had been fought here, and a lot of this was pushed by the National Park Service, because when they give this land away, they normally give it to national parks if they're available. They knew a lot about the Civil War, but they didn't know a whole lot about the Revolutionary War. The offices are in Washington and Hagerstown, Maryland. The president at that time, who had been president most of the time, this group had been doing it for 20 years, is a lawyer from Maryland. Their focus is above the Mason-Dixon line, as a point of getting to. And they decided to learn about the Revolutionary War by hiring a group of eminent historians and historical archaeologists. And they said, look, we're going to save land in all of the 13 colonies, but we need a flagship. Where should we put the flagship? These are the questions they put in this panel. Should we go to Pennsylvania, where we have Philadelphia, Declaration of Independence, Congress was there, we had a number of battles there, maybe New York, where Washington led the army at first, and we had Saratoga out in 1777, changed the whole scope of things. Or Boston, we had the Boston Massacre, you had Lexington and Concord, you had Bunker Hill, which is really Breed's Hill. Where should we go? And this group came back unanimously. And Jim said it really blew him out of the chair when they said, those are all important places, but if it hadn't been for what happened in the Carolinas, particularly South Carolina, we wouldn't have won. We drug it out. And all of that happened, a lot of that happened after Yorktown. And that's what the video I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you a 6-minute video just for a second. In a second, or I'm not going to, Phil's going. This video is about 4 years old. It's a little dated. I'll then come back briefly and update it. But what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is look at this, listen to what it has to say. It explains the concept of the Liberty Trail, but at the same time, think about the professionalism that goes into this thing. And I'll have to warn you, I'm going to ask you a quiz afterward, but I'll answer the question myself. If you'd make it work, Phil, I'd appreciate it.
Was it a dream? Those enraged and devoted hearts who fought for this field, for this road, for this swamp, who snuck like foxes from tree to tree, striking out at the British and then slipping through their grasp? No, a will for liberty took root here and sprouted into a revolution, our independence secured in the low and up country, across these swamps and pastures, forests and hills. The shot, heard round the world, rang out in the North as a rallying cry for American independence. In the southern colonies, however, it served only to amplify the growing discord between American patriots and British loyalists. Pledge allegiance to a king sitting far across the Atlantic, taxing fruits born from Carolinian soil, or stand up to the crown with an inferior army? As stalemate gripped the war in the North, the High Command began to eye the southern colonies, which were thought to harbor sympathy for the Crown, that the British believed could be leveraged into a loyalist army. Twice the British tried to capture the port of Charlestown, the gateway to the South, and finally they were successful in May of 1780. With the southern branch of the Continental Army in retreat, the British now had the foothold in the South to tip the balance of the war in their favor, and in time, snuff out the colonial uprising. But they underestimated the tenacity of Carolinians. Partisan militias had sprung up throughout the state, and experienced as they were, these men believed this land to be their own and were unshakable in their pursuit for liberty. Americans saw desperate and gruesome fighting. They were nearly destroyed at Waxhaws and Camden. But into this Carolina soil, they dug their heels, rising time and again to harass the British and finally prevailing over Loyalist and provincial forces at Musgrove's Mill and Kings Mountain. Word began to spread. A small band of patriots was defying the Crown's efforts to seize the southern colonies. Soon the Continental Army, along with the militia, achieved a cunning victory at Cowpens, setting into motion a string of events that saw the British split in two. One element surrendered at Yorktown, and the other eventually retreated to Charlestown, where they remained till war's end, bottled up by the very patriots they hoped to suppress. With over 200 battles and skirmishes fought within the state's borders, South Carolinians felt the full force of civil and global war. From 1780 to 1782 alone, more than 1,000 South Carolinians laid down their lives on America's road to liberty. But what remains of those intrepid days? Victory lies dormant, buried, and the hallowed grounds where the blood of those brave Carolinians was shed sits neglected and overgrown. The American Battlefield Trust has partnered with the South Carolina Battleground Trust to preserve these battlefields and unify them with the creation of the Liberty Trail. Sweeping across the state, the Liberty Trail is an innovative driving tour that will fully convey South Carolina's Revolutionary War story, bring tourism and economic development to local communities, and invite a larger audience to appreciate the state's contribution to American independence. The trail will feature brand new battlefield parks at Eutaw Springs, Camden, Waxhaws, Hanging Rock, and Fort Fairlawn, and make significant additions and improvements to existing parks. Each stop along the driving tour will feature unique on-site interpretations that will connect visitors to the extraordinary events that came to pass nearly 250 years ago. The Liberty Trail will honor the patriots that decided the Revolution's outcome in the swamps, fields, woods, and mountains of South Carolina. Those Carolinians blazed the trail to liberty. And all we've got to do is cut back the brush, clear off the path, and bring to light South Carolina's pivotal story in the American Revolution. Will you stand by as these battlefields slip further into obscurity? Or will you help us preserve these hallowed grounds and blaze the Liberty Trail?
All right, I promised you a question. Here's a question. Watch documentary. Have you ever heard a narrator pronounce the word W-A-R in 4 syllables? They got somebody from Georgia to narrate, from Georgetown to narrate this. That's the detail we're looking at. When they came south, they joined the South Carolina Battleground Preservation Trust. What I mentioned to you earlier was that this thing is dated. That said 30 sites, we're now at 79.
Oh, wow.
Just recently, Doug Bostic, who's the head of the Battleground Preservation Trust, called me and said, we just got a great new donation from Darla Moore, the Darla Moore Foundation. And at the same time, he said, by the way, we've decided to do 4 more Francis Marion sites around Lake City. Now, you may can put that together, but that's the way it works. We're up to 79, so that's great. The thing is, as you saw in there, it revolves around an app on your phone. We know that you can get somebody my age to listen to you if you talk about history, but if you're talking about my children or people who are younger, they are so used to looking at the phone, you have to get the phone involved. And most apps on phones or on computers or whatever cost from $20,000 to $30,000 to set up. The budget for the app for the Liberty Trail is over $400,000. Because it will do everything that a GPS will do. Between the website and the app, you can plan a trip for 2 weeks or for 2 days or for 3 hours in South Carolina at our American Revolution sites. It'll get you there like any GPS. It'll also tell you the best places for arts and crafts shopping. It'll tell you where the best B&B is, where the best restaurant is, where the best motel is. And for people like me, it'll have a separate section on barbecue. But when you get there, then you've got your own certified professor in your hand, and these things know which direction you're facing.
Yeah, that's great.
And it'll tell you exactly what happened there. Think about a teacher that can take 5th graders out. They've all got phones, and you tell one of them in a group of 4 to cut the phone, and The teacher doesn't even have to learn the story because this thing will do it. And then you can ask it questions. Well, where was Francis Marion before he came to this battle? Well, where did Pickens go after that? Well, what happened to Pickens after the war? And that's why it's so expensive, because it's interactive and it'll answer these questions. It covers for problems that teachers feel when they're teaching about things they don't know a whole lot about themselves. And when you get students out to the site and they're looking at it, we think they'll learn it. That app is available right now, The Liberty Trail. It's got about 30 sites on it. We're going to improve it. The next thing we're going to add is when they're standing at that site looking at it and they're looking out over the land, it will show them with virtual reality what it looked like at that time. So if there are buildings and things of that nature, it'll recreate those. And we think we can sell education to people who don't want to learn about history. And that's the way we're approaching this. So you come down to the question of, can you sell Revolutionary War sites? And I'll just give you some numbers, and you all can do with them as you will, but I think they're kind of impressive. Anybody know where 96 is? 96 is a small town in Greenwood County. It's got 2 stoplights now. Got one recently, got another one. But during the pandemic, the best place to eat in 96 closed. It was called Hardee's. That gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. Mile and a half, 2 miles out of 96 is one of the 2 extant, pristine earthwork forts of the Revolutionary War, Old Star Fort. In the pandemic year now, 2020, 96, it's a national park, the least visited of the national park military monuments. They record people that come in. You've got to sign up how many people, because you pay if you don't have a pass. They only had 95,107 visitors in 2020. 95,000 in the year of the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic. Their projections are that group spent $5.7 million. Musgrove's Mill that I talked about. If you know where Musgrove's Mill is, you go to that interstate where the 26 splits coming from Charleston goes to Greenville and Spartanburg. There's a seafood restaurant, a Waffle House, and a bunch of filling stations. That's it. Well, that's not where Musgrove's Mill is. It's 20 miles away. So it is definitely in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you're not going to stumble across that accidentally. In that year, 2020, they had over 70,000 visitors. And the projection is they spent $4.1 million. I can't tell you where they spent it.
It's restaurants.
But that's what projections are. Now, let's talk about the big boys, the Cowpens and Kings Mountain. Cowpens had 227,000 plus visitors in 2020. The projection is that they spent $14.9 million. Kings Mountain had 246,000 and spent $10.2 million. Now, if between the commission and the Liberty Trail, we can only open 50 new sites, and we use Musgrove's Mills numbers, so we only bring, 4 or 5 million to each of those sites, the areas around those sites. In my mind, that will do a tremendous amount of good to the people of South Carolina. And these sites are all in rural areas. And the chain of how you get this amount of money, you're going to sell gas, you're going to sell Coca-Colas, you're going to sell packs of crackers, you're going to sell restaurants, meals, all of this goes all the way down to the people who are farming and trying to provide more stuff. I think it truly can make an impression. And as I said, it's not just 1 year, it'll be there. And it'll create its own advertising, and the Liberty Trail part of it will continue, and we're hoping the government will continue to fund us at least through 2033, and we can continue to do this. That's what we're asking you to get involved in. The key to all of this, though, is that 250 committee for your county, because the Liberty Trail is going to look to that same group when they come in that area, because you'll be organized. So you all can put the right people on it in every county. and be the leaders to make this thing happen. I've tried not to take up too much time. This is one of the latest maps, but this still doesn't have, yeah, it does. This has got 72 sites on it. It doesn't have 79, but 79 is where we are because this thing keeps on growing. I hope I've expressed at least my idea of what the excitement of this thing is, and I think that you've got some good people here who are interested in this. I hope that you'll give us your blessing. I hope you'll support us. We can't do it without local support. We need the heritage groups, we need the history groups, we need all the people. We need the legislators. So, give us some help wherever you can. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
I went to Francis Marion University, so I like this history.
Well, you understand what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
right, Lacey?
I did have a question. So there's 79 sites now, and am I understanding correctly, the goal is to have a site in every county at least, or?
No,
is it-
the sites for the Liberty Trail are selected according to the research that they do into what happened at that place. And they have to be able to identify it, they have to be able to really justify that they're telling a complete story. It's got to have background. So it's wherever they find places that are important. The Liberty Trail is attached to shedding of blood. Fort Pickety in Cherokee County, there was a conflict there, but there was a surrender and no shot was fired. That can't be on the Liberty Trail. It can be on the commission sites. And the commission wants to include the sites like graveyards, Francis Marion's did, like gardens and other things that were important during that time. We can include houses, historic sites, other things like that. So that's why the two can work together. Liberty Trail can't fund that. Doug at the Liberty Trail calls us up and says, we can't do that, how about, can you do this? And then they'll put a link on the Liberty Trail app to take them to our sites. So that's kind
Yes,
of how that goes.
Are there any sites that are potential for Oconee County on the Liberty Trail then, or will all of the sites for Oconee County be under the 250 committee?
I can't tell you that because I don't know the history like you all do.
What the
If you
ring
find
flag-
things, you can apply for them to be on the Liberty Trail. And,
Okay.
Doug Bossett can lead you through how to do that if you find something that you think justifies it.
Okay.
But the fact that it's not on the Liberty Trail doesn't mean that the 250th will not
Right. It can
support it,
be.
because your county group is gonna be doing that. And it's gonna take a shared responsibility. We'll try to help people in funding these things, but we can't get enough money to do them all by ourselves. So that's why we need buy-in from the county councils and things like that. But I mean, it's a perfect thing for ATAX. And I think, if you can tell the county council that we might can get, an annual income of $5 million out of something, we might listen to it. And remember, these are pandemic numbers. The numbers before were bigger than this. But these are the most recent numbers we've got.
Well, so in my opinion, the immediate point of view is that we need to be working on, and correct me if I misunderstand, in conjunction with the Liberty Trail, trying to focus on some sites in Oconee County to have selling points.
That's exactly right. You pick the sites that have marketability. That's another one of those strange words. But the Liberty Trail did their homework. Women planned the trips. So you need something more than battlefields. And that's why the Liberty Trail was so excited about the 250 idea, because we can work together. But
Right.
but we want you to think about what's here, where it is, how close it is to the main roads, and is it visitable? And then you pick the ones you want, and then we'll help you develop those.
Right, I'm not familiar with the ring fight. Looks like the closest one, and I'm not sure where exactly.
Well, but on the other hand, we know that Pickens had had a home, and we need to find that and, you know, identify it, and we can look into that. And there again, that's something other than a battlefield, so it's easier to sell.
Sure.
And the ring fight, I mean, there's been a question about where that is for a long time. We think we know where it is now, but for years, nobody knew.
We think it's in Oconee County.
Well, yeah. I wasn't trying to contradict that. I was,
We'll be glad to show you where.
anything else? Well, thank you again. I appreciate very much the opportunity to talk to you all. And Dave and Phil have got my contact information. Please, if something comes up, give me a call. We're all over the state right now, and I can always come back if you need me.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Okay. Next item is the Oconee 250 Committee update.
Yes, ma'am. I'll do that, and I'll let Dave jump in if I miss anything. I want to thank Dave for bringing this to the attention of the commission. Several months ago, we've dug in and done some research, and pulled together our stakeholders. We had our first stakeholder meeting last week. We had about 18 people in the room, and I think it will grow a little bit. You had a good diversified group in the room. The university was represented, the museums are represented. I would like this commission, if you choose to adopt what I'm going to ask you to adopt tonight, to have a representation on the committee. If not all of you, but at least one person that serves as that connection point in the room. And they will continue to meet as long as we press forward and you guys foster this committee, which is what we're going to ask you to do. Once the stakeholders and we go through the process, we'll register with the state. We are set to do the resolution that's required for the local committee at the April 19th council meeting. So if you're available, please come to that April 19th at 6 o'clock. They will do that resolution. Once the resolution is done and we're registered, we get all of our stakeholders turned in. We will then meet the grant deadline. Our grant writer for the county is going to take care of that. Brittany was at our meeting and has the information and has immersed herself into that website as well. So we'll get the organizing grant in and completed, and then this stakeholder committee will continue to grow and continue to meet and determine who are their champions, who's going to be the chair, and kind of set their pace moving forward. I'm not going to set that. I'm going to let that committee do that. But I will be the connection point between the county, who will be the fiscal agent for that commission, and collect the grant funds and do the expenditures and things like that, and help guide them, keep them on the right tracks, if you will, from a management standpoint, and kind of let them begin exploring and doing some of the things you heard Bill talk about tonight. So what we're asking is that you officially make a motion to adopt an Oconee 250 committee and have representation from this commission on that committee. And then as the committee gets out of its infancy, you can determine how often do you want them to come back and give you updates. Do you want it monthly? Do you want it quarterly? And then, you know, we can provide some guidance as they get going with the connection point from the commission. And that way you can kind of stay in touch with what happens with that group as they go out and do their research and look across the county and how we can be a part of this interpretation moving forward. How'd I do?
Yeah,
Perfect.
that perfectly summarizes it as far as things, a lot of obviously scholarly research that we want to dive into as a committee, as well as, you know, looking for various sites. We talked about the ring fight. I mean, that's a perfect example. Luther Lyle has a great start-off project for us. He's discovered a site that was in Oconee, the Oconee Village, a Cherokee site, where two campsites of the war, the French and Indian War, British soldiers camped out on as well. And so they want to do some they've already done some preliminary digs there, and they have found some very interesting artifacts, and we can apply for, state grants to foster even more research into that particular area. And there are just a lot of stories within Oconee County that, need to be told at this point. So, I think that the group that we got together with, that Phil pulled together, was, very excited about the opportunity and want to dig in and get started on it.
I am not a historian. I will lean heavily on Leslie to guide my path, so we just, we're looking for that connection back to the county to form our official committee to give them a chance to get started. So that's kind of what I'm asking of you tonight.
Any questions? No. Any discussion? So, would someone like to make a motion? Is there a motion on the table?
I'll be glad to make the motion as Phil suggested.
Adopted. Good for his knowledge.
So we have a motion, basically to, in summary, to direct this committee.
You're going to foster the committee. You want to hear the updates. I really would love a member of this commission. You may not have to do it tonight, but to be a part of that stakeholder group on a regular basis, so that you've got a direct connection and can hear and see firsthand what's going on, and then get regular updates from the committee back to your commission.
Sounds like we had a committee member that was interested.
Do we have to make, when we appoint someone to be a part of this, does it have to be formalized? I don't want to.
So you don't have to do that now.
Okay.
But you can at some point. The resolution, the draft resolution is already complete for next week's, or the 19th council meeting. The resolution calls for any appointments to be approved by either the PRT director or my designee.
Okay.
So probably one of us two will kind of check off and say, yes, that's a good fit for the commission. And that way you build a good diversified stakeholder group that will continue to operate moving forward.
Okay. I just don't want, with deadlines, I don't want anything
Oh,
to
no,
hold this.
that has nothing to do with the deadline.
Okay.
So once you officially approve the committee, the resolution's done, we send the stakeholder information in, we can apply for the grant.
So, that being said, I will go ahead and second the motion that Mr. Lombard has made. So, we have a motion and a second, and I'll open it. Any other discussions? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Those were our discussion items. Our next meeting is scheduled for May 12th here at 6 p.m. Again, we have, it sounds like a lot that could be starting to gear up. If we ever need to look at our schedule to make sure that we have a quorum, please let us know so that we can carry on. I do want to take a moment to welcome Natalie Arnold, who will be serving our District 3. Welcome. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn, unless there's any other?
So move.
We have a motion?
Second.
Second? All in favor? Aye.